to discuss another that made mission, and then for reasons, circumstances beyond your control, which we call an one, you were unable to fulfill. So is that a valid matter? Nodrin laharagin laharamin ulamos. You can make a neder, an untrue or a neder to a murderer or a robber or a tax collector, and we'll see what. So the idea is that these are people that are that you're afraid of, right? That you are you're basically worried for life or limb. So a murderer, obviously, someone who you're afraid is going to kill you. Or a robber, or to a tax collector. Now, the tax collection system was that typically the authorities would sell licenses to collect taxes. So the king or whoever determines he has a budget, he needs to collect $17 billion this year from taxes. So he gets the tax collectors together, he gives them each a territory and say, look, each one of you has to bring in $1 billion. I don't care how you get it. Go ahead and collect taxes. And now the tax collector then collects whatever he wants. If he wants to collect more than the king, then the king is expected from him, he gets to keep the profit. That's why they do it, right? They do it because they can tax above. They've got a kind of a semi legal authority to collect taxes, but they abuse it. Anyway, and of course they can use force. So if you make a neder to such a person, for example, shehi truma. So let's say they're coming to rob you or to collect from you, and you say, listen, you don't want that grain in my silo. That's all truma. It's not as valuable because truma doesn't have as big a market. It can only be eaten by kohanim. So you make a neder that that something is truma. In other words, like I won't, I will forswear whatever if that is truma. Alpha Pisheno truma, but it's not really truma. Or shehein shel beis hamelech, or you claim that property you're trying to take to confiscate from me for taxes or to steal, that's actually royal property. You can't collect that. So obviously the person will be, excuse me, less inclined to take the stuff if it's royal property, because then he's risking the wrath of the sovereign. Even though it's not true. So Beis Shammai, so that's the general principle. That you can make these, if you make a vow about something under these circumstances, that's called a neder onsin. That's basically you're being forced to do it. So it's a little less circumstances not under your control, but it's fear of what might happen. So it's obvious that you don't really mean this. You're only doing it for the purposes of evading the negative consequences that are about to befall you. Now, of course, if the tax collector had read this Mishnah, then he wouldn't take the neder seriously. But that's another problem. So now let's discuss the details. Beis Shammai says you can make any kind of vow to convince the person that this is truma or that it's royal property. So what's any kind of vow? You can, for example, say, I'm making this hektish if it's not royal property, right? So that's supposed to convince the guy that, he wouldn't say that, he wouldn't consecrate something and lose the benefit from it unless he were really telling the truth that it's royal property. Or could be, I'm never going to eat bananas again if this is not royal property. So Beis Shammai says whatever kind of neder you want to make, you can make a false one. It's not effective. But you can't take a shvua. Shvua is something where you say, you swear by God that this is so. So that you can't do. Beis Hillel says yes, you can even do a shvua. Beis Shammai omrim lo yiftach lo b'neder. Beis Shammai says you shouldn't volunteer this neder, right? It's like don't get any smart ideas here and make these nedarim because they're ineffective, because like we don't want you to get too liberal with making nedarim. But if the tax collector says, you know what, I don't really believe this is truma, but if you swear to me that it's truma, then I'll believe you. Then you can do that. Beis Hillel says no, you can initiate it. Beis Shammai omrim b'mahu shehu madiro, Beis Hillel omrim af b'ma she'eino madiro. So let's say the tax collector says, I'll believe you only if you take an oath that you'll make this hektish. And you say, you know what? Not only do I make this hektish, I make my whole house hektish if this is not truma. Okay, so like don't be going beyond what he asked you, according to Beis Shammai. But Beis Hillel says, no, you can even exaggerate, you can even exceed the terms proposed to you by the tax collector and be more expansive. And because again, we understand that this is something that you're doing only because you're being forced to, and it's not your real intention. Kate said, the Mishnah illustrates how this works. If the tax collector says to you, make a neder that I swear off any benefit from my wife, if this is not truma. And you say, not only my wife, I swear off my entire family from having any benefit from me or from getting any benefit from them if this is not truma. So that is exceeding the terms that the tax collector proposed. So Beis Shammai says, oh, he only asked you about the wife, right? He only says swear off benefit from your wife. So that part we discount, right? We know that you're only doing that because you're afraid. But the part where you added in and my children, then you have to keep the neder about your children, because who brought up the children? Like the fact that you made a neder about them is completely extraneous and uncalled for. So that part of the neder we take to be valid. And the Gemara will discuss, how can you, isn't this a half a neder? Like we've seen already that you can't split a neder. Beis Hillel says, no, the whole neder is all part of one. It's all of a piece, and the whole neder is invalid. So first Gemara asks, Shmuel said, there's a principle that you have to obey the law of the land, right? So what is this business of trying to evade taxes, right? The law is you have to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes. What's this business of trying to evade paying taxes? Rav Shmuel. So Rav China answers, so as I mentioned before, we're talking about where the tax collector is not the IRS that says this is what you legally owe. The tax collector has a license to collect whatever he wants, and he's trying to over collect from you more than your share to enrich himself. Sorry. Trying to enrich himself. That you can evade. Rav Yana answered differently. We're talking about the local mafia guy, the local enforcer, right? He doesn't have any legal authority to collect. He sets himself up as the enforcer for the neighborhood, and he collects a tax, as it were, a payoff from everybody. So it's talking about taxes, which aren't really taxes. It's protection money. The protection money, there's no legal authority to collect, and therefore you're certainly allowed to try to evade those. Okay. So the Mishnah said, what kind of vows are we talking about? One of the examples is you say something is royal property, even though it's not royal property, and you're trying to protect against collection of it. So how does this work exactly? Rav Amar says, I swear off all produce. I'm not going to eat any produce if this is not royal property. In other words, I'm trying to convince you it is royal property. So I say, if not, I swear off all produce, right? So obviously, I must be telling the truth because I don't want to swear off all produce. So Gemara says, but Kevan the Amar Yasru, Itzru Ale Kol Peri Alma. So so the Gemara is apparently saying here that this is like you're taking on too much, right? Saying like I'm swearing off all produce. Well, that's like more than is needed to mollify or to convince the tax collector not to collect the property. So since he, by saying so, doesn't that make it a valid neder? So Gemara says no, but Omer Hayom. It's not that he's saying an unlimited ban on me consuming any produce. He's saying today, right? So that is a, within reason that the, that would serve well enough to mollify or to defend oneself against the tax collector, but is not too great that it's more than is necessary. So the Gemara says, if he only says that, he says, I'm only not going to eat any produce today. So why would that convince anybody, right? The tax collector is going to say, fine, you're not eating today. That, big deal, right? You're not really obligating yourself in something that's really a burden to you. I don't believe you. So the Gemara says, you're saying, I swear off all produce, and you think to yourself today, right? So as far as the tax collector is concerned, this is like a huge obligation that you're taking on yourself. It must be that you're telling the truth, right? But really in your head, you're saying just today, right? So you're not really taking on this huge obligation. You're taking on, you're proposing to take on a minor obligation. And that's why it is considered sufficient but not excessive to deter the tax collector. Even though usually we say, things that are unsaid are not valid conditions, right? If you say A and you think B, we have to go by what you say and what comes out of your mouth. So however, in this case of coercion, where you're in fear, then we understand that that we will take into account your actual thoughts. Okay, so this is all kind of intuitive, although the part about, exactly how much is sufficient to deter the tax collector, that's a little murky. But the idea that, we don't usually take unspoken words into account, but we do in this case, that's kind of intuitive. Now, Beit Shammai Omrim, Bakol, you can take any kind of vow. And they also say what the tax collector demands of you, that is that we discount, but Basil says no, whatever, even if you exceed that. Kate said, and the Mishnah said, Omar Konamli Ishti unanimously, Omar Konam Ishti unanimously, if the tax collector says, take a vow that you won't benefit from your wife, and you say, not only my wife and children. So Beishami Amrim Isha Mutaris Uvanu Asari. Beishami says, okay, who asked you about the kids? Well, the kids, your letter is valid. And Basil says no, they're both invalid. Amar of Huna, Tan. We have a brisa. Beishami Omrim Lo Yiftach Lo B'Shvua. Beishami says don't volunteer a shvua. Basil Omrim Af Yiftach Lo B'Shvua. No, the shvua, which is the most severe kind of vow, you can even volunteer that. So Beishamai B'Shvua Hu Lo Yiftach Lo. So Beishamai says, don't open with a shvua, don't offer a shvua, but that implies have a neder yiftach lo. Like, why are they taking the most severe case? It must be that they're saying, oh, a neder, a plain neder, you can offer, right? But don't offer a shvua because a shvua is more serious. Vatanan, but then our Mishnah says, don't open with a neder. So isn't that contradictory? For two, and moreover, mivtach lo yiftach lo b'shvua. The Brisa says that like don't offer a shvua. Hamed another b'shvua. But without the offer, like if the guy demands from you, then you can even do a shvua. But our Mishnah says no, you can't even do a shvua even if he demands it of you. So the Mishnah and the Brisa are so Tana. The Mishnah is tells you that you can initiate a neder to tell you how strong Beis Shammai is. That you can't even initiate not only a shvua, but you can't even initiate a neder. Tana Brisa b'shvua lodiacha kochan Beis Hillel, but the Brisa discusses a shvua not because Beis Shammai says only a shvua you can't do, but to tell you that Beis Hillel says even a shvua you can do. So that's why the Brisa discusses a shvua. The Mishnah discusses a neder, but it's not necessary to imply to the exclusion of the other in each case. Okay. Rav Ashi answers differently. But what Beis Shammai means to say in the Brisa is that you can't even undo the shvua, right? You can't even like nullify the shvua by going to a sage. And Beis Hillel says that you can. Okay. All right. Next mission. Another example. These plantings, these trees, right? These young trees, I'm making them. It's unclear if it means I'm making them a korban, meaning like I'm donating them to the temple, or if you're just doing another, like they're forbidden to me, like a korban. But in any case, you make a condition if they're not cut down. Or talis do korban imen on surface, or this coat I'm making a korban if it is not burnt. Yeshlan pidyon. So then, if the conditions are fulfilled, the trees are cut down, or the talus is burned, then they do become a korban, as you said. Yeshlan pidyon, then they have to be redeemed. Which implies that, in other words, the Gemara will discuss why it uses this language, but has to be redeemed means it is effectively becomes a korban, or like a korban if we're talking about another, and in order to use them, you have to redeem them from Hakadosh. So that sounds more like either redeem them from Hakadosh, or if we're talking about making another, that this is like a korban means you have to get the neder annulled. Now, let's say you say that these trees are korban until they're cut down, right? Once they're cut down, they're no longer a korban. Talizu korban ashetisar. If this coat is a korban until it gets burned, ein lehem pidyon. They cannot be redeemed. So Gemara will discuss what does this mean? They can't be redeemed. In the context, it seems like it means that they don't need to be redeemed, meaning the korban, the neder is not effective. But we'll see. So first of all, the Gemara says "V'li'nei kadoshos ve'ein kadoshos." So it questions like why do we use this term yesh lahem pidyon? They can be redeemed, or they must be redeemed. Why don't you just say the neder is effective? Right? What are you bringing in the redemption for? So my answer is I did the boy the miss and sefer elam pidyon, because we want to use that language in the end of the Mishnah, so we're mirroring the language. So tanami reish yesh lahem pidyon. So hechanother, what is the neder exactly? Amar Meimar says Ba'amar im einon niktsasos hayam. Let this thing be a korban, this tree be a korban if it's not cut down today. They didn't get cut down. So then the condition is fulfilled, and it becomes a korban that needs pidyon. That's obvious, right? Like, what is so special about this case? you have a condition. The condition is fulfilled, then the neder is effective. We're talking about where there's a hurricane going on. Okay, so in other words, you're pretty sure this tree is coming down in the hurricane. Okay, and if so even though you had an expectation that the tree would definitely fall, and that's why you made the neder, if it didn't fall, still, so you were an idiot. Like don't make decisions. But in other words, it's not that obvious. You might have thought that clearly the person did not intend. They didn't think that the condition would be fulfilled, so maybe the neder is invalid. No, the neder is valid because that is the condition that you made explicitly of the neder, and the condition was fulfilled. Okay, so fine. You explained the trees in the hurricane. What about the parallel case of the coat, right? Like, why do you have to tell me about the coat? There's no hurricane situation here. The talis l'shreifa kaima is like, that's something that you have an expectation that the coat is going to be burned. Where says yeah, because the coat you're talking about is in a burning building. Okay, so clearly your expectation is this coat is going to be burned. If it ends up not being burned, then the condition is fulfilled. You said if it's not burned and didn't get burned miraculously, so your neder is made on that condition is indeed valid. So it's similar to the hurricane or the fire is all the same of a piece. So as I explained, it's like, you might think to say that, listen, this guy, the condition wasn't real. Like, he was sure that the coat was going to burn, the tree was going to be blown down. So it's not a real condition. Kamashma, no, it is a real condition. You shouldn't have said, if that's not what you meant. If that's what you meant, that's what you should have said. Excuse me. Okay, Harinati Yisailu Karban. I wonder if we should actually leave it here because there's not a good place to stop after this. Tomorrow's stuff is short, so I don't mind leaving it for David. The base is short also. Okay, I'm going to leave it here.
Thank you, Dov, as always.
All right. Maybe I'll have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay. Good Thanksgiving to all.
And to you.
And to you.